What up, everybody? My name is Marcus Whitley, and this is Good Behavior. Now, you can find me on all social media at I am Marcus Whitley, and find any of my books, Both Sides of the Street, Choices and Consequences, Greatness Under Pressure, and Battling Demons, all on Amazon. Now, to keep up with the latest episodes, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. What's going on? My name is Marcus Whitley, and yes, this is Good Behavior. Now, in today's episode, I want to read a chapter from my book, Greatness Under Pressure. Now, this was a memoir about what it was like to survive incarceration. So I'd like to share that story with you. Now, this chapter that I want to read is the introduction to the book. It's the prelude. So let's get into it. Sitting in a courtroom, surrounded by all of these unfamiliar faces, was one of the scariest moments of my life. An attorney standing next to me explaining my side of the story, while a district attorney at the table next to us was telling everyone in the room how bad of a person I am. She told them that I am a monster and I should spend the rest of my life in prison. All I could do was sit and watch as she called witnesses to come up in front of the courtroom to explain what happened from their point of view. The victims went one after the other, explaining how I approached the window of the car with a hoodie on and bandana on my face and pointed a gun at the side of the driver's head. Then how I struck him repeatedly in the face with the barrel of the gun. Blood gushed from his cheek and nose. He explained how he couldn't see anything. Everything was blurry and then went black. Moments later, the same victim stated he never looked up at the assailant, nor had he seen his face. But he was asked to pick his assailant out of a lineup. One victim pointed me out, and the other picked out someone else. When the investigating officer was testifying, he was asked if the other man that was picked out of the lineup was arrested or questioned. The officer stated no, he was not. I noticed neither of the victims nor officers stated how the victims had set up to meet my brother in a dark area of the park, and how one of them had a knife on him. Of course, no one would mention that because it didn't go the way that they had planned. As I sat there listening to them talk about me like I'm a wild animal that belongs in a cage, I became angry. But they wanted me to lash out and show the courtroom I was a monster, that what shouldn't be allowed in society. I held my composure and refused to give the district attorney that satisfaction. Even if I appeared angry, the jury would look at me as a violent criminal that she described. Not saying anything or speaking up for myself when someone belittled me like that is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. My hands were sweaty and shaking so much that I couldn't even hold a cup of water in front of me. As dry as my throat felt, I was scared to pick it up and take a sip because I might spill it, and everyone already was staring at me, judging me. I could feel the air was on, but my whole body was sweating under my suit, like I was sitting in a sauna. The moment the verdict came in and the foreman said guilty, my heart dropped. My chest was tight and my throat felt like it closed. I couldn't speak, swallow, or breathe. I could hear my family screaming and crying behind me, but I froze. I couldn't move or turn around to even look at them. 2 court officers approached me and handcuffed me as they escorted me to the holding tank downstairs. Every minute inside of that holding tank felt like an hour. At least 15 other people were there with me, pacing back and forth because the benches were filled up with people sitting on them. There was a single toilet on the side of the room with no stall or anything around it. So if you had to go to the bathroom, there was no privacy. After a few hours, we were all given a bologna sandwich, an apple, and a carton of milk. I couldn't see outside because there were no windows in the basement, so I assumed it was dinner at that time. I saw a few people leave, but most of them came back. A little while later, when my name was called along with a few others, we were handcuffed and shackled together. 5 guards guided us to a white van with no windows on it. The door in the back of the van opened and we climbed in one after another. filling up the benches on both sides of the van with another person chained on each side of me, staring at another individual across from me in the same situation. It was cold, crowded, and filled with other scared and angry grown men. If anyone tells you that they weren't scared that first time, they be lying. When that door opened, we were at the Hampden County Jail. I'm not sure if it was the anger or adrenaline still flowing through my body, but I wasn't scared or able to process what was happening at that moment. I entered the processing area and I was instructed to take off my clothes. It was given an orange jumpsuit, white boxers, socks, and bobos, which are jail shoes. I was also given a box filled with a pillowcase, blanket, a few cosmetics, and a laundry bag. I had been here before when I was younger in the Scared Straight program, so it was somewhat familiar to me. When I got to my cell, a Spanish kid was laying on the bottom bunk, just staring up at the underneath of the top bunk. I took out my pillowcase and blanket, slid my box and bobos under the bed, and climbed up on the top bunk. For hours, I laid there lost in my thoughts, too anxious or angry to close my eyes. I felt my body was extremely tired and forced myself to sleep. That only lasted for about maybe 4 hours before it was morning and the doors opened for breakfast. That morning, I remember waiting in line for what looked like grits and a slice of bread with a carton of milk. Every meal was the same: chicken, meatloaf, eggs, or whatever it was had no flavor to it whatsoever. If you didn't look at it, you wouldn't even know what you were eating. I never tasted food so bland in my life. The floors were nasty and I refused to let my feet touch the floor barefoot. Guys spit, vomit, piss, bleed, jerk off, and ejaculate all over the floor. So I wore my shower shoes, which are flip-flops, every time I took a shower. Maybe I was paranoid or it could have been my OCD, but I was not going in there touching the walls or the floor in those showers. I wanted to call my mom and girls so bad, but something in me wouldn't let me. I didn't want to hear either of them crying or hear the hurt in their voices. I was going through enough and I don't know if I would have been able to handle that. I spent most of my time watching TV out in the common area whenever we were out of our cells or sitting around talking with a few other people I knew from the street. Even though I associated with a few, I still kept my distance. I knew nothing about jail except for stories, TV, and a Scared Straight program that lasted about 2 hours. I've always been the quiet type of person who observes my surroundings before making any kind of moves or decisions. So I felt the smartest thing I could do was stay to myself. My life and future was out of my hands and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Those days of waiting to be sentenced had my anxiety through the roof. I couldn't think or focus on anything else. Finally, the day came and my name was called for court. I packed up everything I had back into that box I was given and headed back to the processing area. My body was half asleep. My mind was wide awake from the anxiety. They woke me up at 5 a.m. to start getting ready, jump in the shower, and gather all my things. At that time, I wasn't a morning person, but I adapted very quickly. I took off the orange jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big and put back on the suit that I was wearing the day I arrived. Same as before, I was chained around the waist, ankles, and hands to a person on each side of me. We were escorted onto the van and driven back to the courthouse. Sitting in that holding tank again with about 20 other anxious and angry people waiting to be called into the courtroom was an unsettling feeling. Some of them were scared, some were trying to act tough like it was nothing to them, and others were just hanging out like they didn't have a care in the world. The thought anyone could get used to this and be comfortable with it was unreal to me. When my name was called, I was handcuffed and escorted upstairs to the courtroom. As soon as I walked in, I saw my mom, my girl, and a few other people sitting in the seats. My mom was crying and that broke my heart. So I turned my head and walked to my seat next to my attorney. Within a few minutes, the court officer said, "All rise." Everyone stood up, and then the judge walked in and sat down. We were told to. Then the judge walked in and sat down. We were all told to be seated after that. I noticed there was no jury this time. Just me, my lawyer, the district attorney, the judge, my family, and a few others that were waiting to see their family members. My lawyer was trying to argue for a 3-5, while the district attorney was arguing for a 7-10. Just hearing all these numbers being thrown around had me terrified. The judge explained that my crime had a maximum of life in prison. But he decided on 5 to 6 to be served in prison, followed by 3 years of probation upon release. My body froze, and I felt the same way I did when I heard the jury say guilty. I was in shock, but I had no emotions. I heard faint screams coming from behind me, but couldn't move my head to look back at my family. I wasn't sad or angry. I couldn't scream or cry. It's like I was broken and couldn't do anything. I was escorted back to the holding tank where I sat for a few hours, oblivious to everything else that was going on around me. My hands and legs were shaking as I stared at the floor, a blank look on my face. Transport arrived, and like before, I was chained and shackled to a person on each side of me and put in a van. This time, the ride felt like it was never going to end. We finally came to a stop, and I heard a gate open. Then the van moved again and came to another stop. The back door opened and we climbed out. I looked up and saw a giant wall and a barbed wire fence along the inside of the wall. There were guards and towers above the wall and guards walking around everywhere. The building looked like an old rundown school. It was the most intimidating thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not intimidated easily. One of the guards said, "Welcome to MCI Cedar Junction." Now, that was the prelude to my book, Greatness Under Pressure. If you haven't got it, go out and get it. It's available on Amazon and everywhere else books are sold. Now, my name is Marcus Whitley, and this is Good Behavior. So until the next episode.